Okay, quiet everybody. We're getting ready to roll. Action.
I'm often asked if I believe in evolution. And I'll say, well, I believe in microevolution, small changes over time. I mean, that's obvious, right? We see lots of variation within kinds. So that has to be true. Look, Noah didn't take 2 of every species of ant on his ark. I mean, there are over 20,000 different species of ants alone. That would have been over 40,000 ants. And consider that there are around 5 million different species of insects. That's crazy. I mean, I get itchy just thinking about it. So yeah, microevolution within kinds makes total sense. A wise, all-knowing God obviously allowed for it when he created everything and declared it all good, because he knew he was just gonna have to drown it all in a few years anyway. Because, evil. Well, hindsight, what are you gonna do? But macroevolution, a fish turning into a monkey, that's just an atheist fairy tale. Look, I don't have enough faith to believe that, or education. See, I believe in a historical Adam, and I think God created Adam out of dust, just like it says in the Bible. I mean, that makes way more sense than, natural laws doing it. I mean, when was the last time gravity ever made somebody? Never. It just sits there pulling on stuff all day. And don't tell me chemicals can naturally assemble or self-replicate like RNA does. Okay, yeah, technically RNA is a chemical, and yeah, it can self-assemble and replicate in laboratory settings that simulate early Earth conditions. But come on, believing that can happen naturally requires a huge leap of faith. No, it makes much more sense to conclude that God made Adam from dust, probably with some rocks for bones or something, I'm guessing some liquid, well, a lot of liquid if you think about it. So not literally dust, more like a big, bloody puddle of human goop. And then he made Eve from Adam's rib. I mean, that's just common sense. Mm-hmm. So when did this happen? Well, I don't know for certain. Probably sometime between Let There Be Light and Stop Asking Questions. But you know what? Let's leave the Bible out of it for now, because even though I believe it's true, because I really don't want to burn in hell forever if I start to doubt, I don't want to come across as biased, okay? See, I think macroevolution is false on the merits. It has nothing to do with the Bible. The evidence for it is just weak, and there's very strong evidence against it. Dr. Frank Turek, who I regard as a genius, destroys macroevolution. And he should know because he's a doctor of Christian ministry, but I'm sure he told somebody to take an aspirin at some point, right?
Don't talk to me, we're filming.
Anyway,
idiot.
He breaks it all down using a simple acronym, L.I.F E, which is brilliant, because really, where would the history of scientific discovery even be without acronyms? So the L in L.I.F E stands for limited capacity for change. Like, for example, dog breeders. They've been breeding dogs for centuries, right? As a result, you can get a dog as small as a Chihuahua or as large as a Great Dane. But that's it. You can't go beyond that. That's the limit. You can't break the genus of dogs. Look, you can't turn a dog into a bird, no matter how hard you try. And I should know because when I tried it, the ASPCA called the Department of Animal Services on me. So not only is it impossible, but the deep state shows up at your front door and you get threatened with jail time, a $5,000 fine, and a lifetime ban from Petco.
God.
I mean, just for trying to prove science is fake. It's a big conspiracy.
Oh, Christ.
Look, if an intelligent person like myself couldn't evolve a dog into a bird, what makes anyone think that it can happen naturally? I mean, I even had the advantage of using a hacksaw and a blowtorch, but I got nothing.
Oh, what the fuck?
The I stands for Irreducible Complexity. Michael Behe came up with this concept in 1996. In his book, Darwin's Black Box, he argued that there are many parts of living things that can't evolve gradually, or at least not in a way that he could easily understand. And so he concluded if he couldn't figure it out or be bothered to read what other microbiologists had already figured out, these structures must have popped into existence all at once, like magic, proving an intelligent designer. And here's the thing, he kept it scientific. He never came right out and said it was God, I mean, it could have been aliens after all. Sure, he's a devout Christian who works for the Discovery Institute, which is an organization devoted to promoting the Bible as literal science and history. But being the professional scientist he is, he stayed totally neutral about which magical sky being it might actually be. Because that's what scientists do. And even though he's been thoroughly debunked and humiliated in a court of law, he doesn't acknowledge it or ever really even talk about it, so it doesn't count. Therefore, irreducible complexity proves macroevolution is false. F is for fossils, because the fossil record doesn't support macroevolution. No, it actually supports instantaneous creation. I know this because of something called the Cambrian Explosion, which according to their dating system occurred about 530 million years ago in what is considered a geological instant over the course of only 25 million years or so. So if you ask me, that sounds way more like the creation story in the Bible than this, series of gradual fossils they keep going on about, doesn't it? I mean, 25 million years, 24-hour day, we're really just splitting hairs at this point. And this is a big problem for Darwin because he said, if my theory is true, why isn't the geological strata filled with all these intermediate fossils? And then he said, well, don't worry because we'll investigate it and eventually I'll be vindicated. Well, for 160 years, we've been investigating the fossil record and, they claim to have found like 10,000 species that are intermediate. But if you think about it, they don't count because they'll say, like, what about Tiktaalik? It has fins like a fish, but also wrists, elbows, and a neck like a land animal. But it's really just a fish that can do push-ups. Or they'll bring up early whales like Ambulocetus that had legs for walking on land. And I'll remind them, well, snakes used to have legs too until they pissed off God. So clearly whales used to be jerks. And don't get me started on like hominid fossils showing a transition from ape-like ancestors to modern humans. They were clearly just short, homely people who never got invited to parties, which is why we only find their bones in the middle of nowhere. Look, evolution can't win this argument because every time they claim to have found a transitional fossil, we just point out that they actually just created 2 new gaps. And as everyone knows, that's just more proof of God. And finally, E stands for something that's known as epigenetics. Now think of your DNA as a giant cookbook. Every cell in your body has the same cookbook in it, but epigenetic markers are like sticky notes inside the cookbook that tell your body which recipes to make where. Only make lasagna in the kitchen, only make cupcakes in the bakery, and never make fish in the microwave at work. But here's the thing, epigenetic markers can't be mutated like DNA. No, they're just chemical tags for gene expression. DNA sometimes mutates when it's copied. The text in the book can be edited, but the sticky notes, they're not part of the text, so they don't mutate. They can't. So macroevolution is impossible, right? Because if a recipe changes from a few copying mistakes, the sticky notes still stay in the same place and tell you to make that recipe, even if it's slightly different now, which means suddenly the cupcakes in the bakery have sprinkles on them. Which, okay, is kind of like evolution, I get that, but that's just microevolution, and we already said God's cool with that. But if the recipe changes too much, right? Like now you got baking soda instead of baking powder, not enough sugar, too much oil, not enough butter, and somehow you've added barbecue sauce now, right? I mean, nobody wants that. The bakery's ruined. Even a new pastry chef can't save cupcakes with barbecue sauce, so you fire him. And you have to start making something else, like fried chicken. But see, nobody wants fried chicken in the bakery. Fried chicken doesn't belong in the bakery, unless it comes with like waffles or something. You ever have fried chicken on waffles?
What are you?
They're really good.
No,
you wouldn't think so
filming,
at first.
you idiot.
But that's not the point. The point is, if the change is too dramatic, odds are that the markers will just create a disgusting, inedible mess, and that, won't work. Nobody wants that. And like I already told you, these chemical markers don't mutate. So the big changes that you need for macroevolution can't ever happen. The chemical markers would have to change too, which would require changing the DNA that makes the proteins, that makes the enzymes, that puts the markers there in the first place, which, okay, does happen. But, okay, only in small amounts, very gradually. Typically, it takes millions of years, which technically would be enough time for macroevolution, except the Bible clearly tells us it all just happened a few thousand years ago, back when snakes could talk and fruit had magical powers. Science. So look, the evidence for macroevolution just isn't there. There's good evidence against it. I mean, I only gave you 4 examples because I couldn't think of a better acronym than L.I.F E. But even if it turned out that macroevolution is true, would that mean that God doesn't exist? Of course not. It would just mean the Bible's creation story wasn't, factually true. I mean, Adam and Eve weren't real. Original sin doesn't exist, and Jesus' death to atone for it would have been pointless. But, other than that, nothing would really change.
Cut.